We are about to start one of the keynote panels called Women's Empowerment in Emerging India. And it is our privilege to have such panelists here. And on such an occasion, when we have International Women's Day after 2 days on 8th of March, I would just like to hand over to the moderator. And before that, I would like to introduce our moderator for this panel, Professor Marty Chen. She teaches at Harvard Kennedy School and at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. She runs a global research policy action network, Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, called WIEGO. And she's an expert on employment, gender, and poverty, especially the working poor in the informal economy. And you would be happy to know that she grew up in India and worked in India during the 1980s. Over to Marty Ben.
Namaste and good afternoon, and welcome for those who've come for this panel to the Harvard Kennedy School. And it's really a great privilege and honor to be asked to moderate this panel on a very important topic of women's empowerment in the emerging India. And it's a great privilege and honor to welcome and also to introduce our panelists tonight. What we'll do is I'll introduce all three speakers and say a few prefacing words. Then they will each speak for about 15 minutes, and then we will have a chance for some Q&A from you, the audience. So all three speakers are so distinguished that I can't possibly do justice to all the awards they've won, so I'm going to just share some basic facts about them. Kiran Bedi, as you all know, is a renowned police officer who joined the force in 1972 as the first woman officer in the police force, and she rose in the ranks to become Director General of the police. She is very well known around the world for her preventive and reformative approach to policing, particularly when she was Inspector General of the prisons in the early 90s. During her career, she managed to study law, write a PhD dissertation, and many books, including her own autobiography called It's Always Possible. And I think that's a good theme for our session today. She is also a social activist who runs a couple of foundations dedicated to education and empowerment of women and girls. And this year, she entered politics. Rahul Bose is well known as a prize-winning actor and director, and as a sportsman. But he too is a social activist. He runs an NGO called The Foundation, which seeks to promote education and reduce sexual abuse of children. He is a global ambassador for Oxfam. He has won many awards for his work in the films, but also for his social work. Reinana Jhabvala, she's a distinguished social activist and national coordinator of the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA. She has worked for decades with SEWA. I won't name how many because I don't want to give away her age. But she has been organizing working poor women in the informal economy, at the same time promoting inclusive policies, programs, laws in support of the working poor in the informal economy. She is well known around the world for her leadership on these issues and is the founding chair of several regional and international organizations of informal workers. She is also the chancellor of the Gandhian University, Gandhigram Rural University. So those are our three distinguished speakers, and before handing over to them, I wanted to set the stage for our conversation on the economic, social, and political disadvantages faced by women and the efforts to empower them. As Sanjay Bai said, I grew up in India and have worked in India since the 80s. So I have seen many changes. I have seen child mortality go down. I have seen girls' education go up. But I am also very aware of the many kinds of challenges that remain. And I just want to share challenges in the two domains that I have particularly worked on in India. One is on women's employment, which is my main area of work, but the other is about widowhood in India. So on women's employment, the labor force participation rate of women in India at around 30% is one of the lowest in the world. That's 30% of women over 15. And almost 95% of all women workers in India are engaged in the informal economy. This is the highest rate of informal employment in the world. 40% of all workers, all women workers in India outside of agriculture are engaged in private homes where they remain invisible. And this is not housewives doing domestic work. I'm talking about 30% of all women workers outside agriculture are home-based producers, making goods and providing services from their own homes. And 10% work in the homes of others as domestic workers. So 40% of this very small relatively small women's labor force is hidden from sight in private homes. Turning to widowhood in India, there are some 40 million widows in India. India is one of the few countries where widows are expected to sort of observe mourning for the whole of their life, what I have called in the title to one of my books, perpetual mourning. And where there are child widows because of young age at marriage and taboos against remarriage. In my study, I set out to see in 14 villages across 7 states of North and South India who was taking care of the widows and how did they survive. And what I found, I interviewed all ever widowed women in these 14 villages, 562 in all. And over half, 52% of the widows lived on their own or with other single women in what I call female households with no adult male. So now I turn over to our speakers, having set the stage, and I know we are going to have an excellent panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, friends, for being here this evening. For me, it's been a very nice journey to Harvard. Not the first, of course, but very happy to be here, very privileged. I want to thank my colleague from the Indian Police Service, Sagar, who invited me, Sanjay, and Rajat. I want to say thank you to you. Where's Sagar? By the way, Sagar trained with me when I was a trainer in the Delhi Police, and he was my first probationer. I'm so happy that his world is opening up in the police services, and he will bring a lot more knowledge and ideas back into the Indian Police Service. I speak, in the 15 minutes I have, it's 5:25 now. I'll be happy to be given a 2-minute alert. By the way, it's very interesting. When I was fighting the elections in January and February, Sagarika Ghose from one of the newspaper asked me, "What will you do if you lose?" Guess what I said? I said, "I'll come to Harvard." And that was an honest answer, because if I lose, I come. If I don't, I get stuck. And what do I do? Run the broom, because the constituency from which I was fighting was full of garbage. So I speak on the subject of women's empowerment from the background of my 37 years of Indian policing, 2 NGOs which are focused on women in villages and marginalized sections of society for the last 26 years. I did my doctorate in domestic violence and drug abuse, and I did a television program called Kiran Ki Kacheri, focusing also on women's issues. I'm going to take you into, I have my presentation in 2 parts. One is bring you to speed. So what have I seen in my 40 years of alive living as a woman in India who was growing up in the 60s? What did I see? Where did I see a change? So that's my part 1 of the presentation. And then part 2 is, where do we go? Because I feel women empowerment is an unfinished agenda in India. Very unfinished. What is unfinished about it? And how do we keep it running and then finish it one day? Not in my lifetime, but in your lifetime, I hope. So here is my first part. When I was growing up, what did I not see? I didn't see conflict. I didn't see conflict. Those of us who wanted to make it, there was no conflict. There was no competition. Visionary parents had no competition because we were the very few unique and the whole world was open for us. I found no competition. Like, for instance, we were the only family playing competitive tennis in Amritsar. There was no competition. From Amritsar, there was no competition for my parents. So all of us playing competitive tennis. No competition. So I didn't see competition. I saw culture of submission. I saw women reconciled. I saw low aspiration. I saw no choices women had. They were reconciled to their marriages. And they were quite happy in it because they had no choices. There was no market pressure of what you have or what you don't have. There was no television. And later on, you had just one black and white Doordarshan. So there were no market pressures. There was huge pressure of dowry. Very huge pressure of dowry. I used to see it myself as a young girl when attending weddings, displayed marriages, dowries displayed, till it became a law later. Hence, women had an early preparation of being ready to be getting married. And I used to see an early preparation. Mothers getting into stitching, tailoring, savings, investments, dowry to be displayed. So needlework, etc. all came. Like, for instance, in my convent school, that's the only subject I failed was in needlework. Because I refused to prepare for something like that. So hence, there was an early preparation, both in mind and material. Many friends of mine were getting ready to be saying, "Oh, we're just graduating to find a better partner." So despite my saying, no, education is important, go on, they say, "Kiran, forget it." So that's why I was the only one who had very short hair. Most of the women had long hair, because long hair got you a better partner. Short hair made the men scared of you, because they were wondering who you were. But I saw the world becoming a global village by 1975, when the Year of the Woman was declared. All this came under questioning when everything was started to get questioned. Women started to question who they were, why were they submitting, etc. So issues of dowry deaths, if you remember, stove deaths. Remember stove deaths? Daughter-in-law dying by stove deaths. 498A came, the Istri Dhan, the courts gave the order, the Istri Dhan, whatever comes with the woman belongs to her. It said. So Istri Dhan. All this focused on women, but the fault was nothing got focused on men. We kept focused on women after 1975. I didn't see any focus on men. We were only complaining against them, but didn't do anything much about them. So the girls grew. Because of the focus on girls grew, educated, not free yet. Educated, but not free. They had really still no rights on whatever they were earning. They were the very few like us who were moving towards self-reliance. Meanwhile, what happened? Markets exploded, incomes increased, demands happened, conflicts came, and so did domestic violence. And so did mobility. Women start to be more mobile. But with women's mobility did not match needs and challenges of security. Nor did criminal justice system come to speed with it. It did not keep pace. It's still out of pace. It's still far behind, which is why the further problems happened. So hence, crimes against women grew, weak laws, weak systems, weak punishments or delayed punishments. Rights of accused were rights. Victims were still not considered as, victimology is still not involved in India, if you ask me. It's more of rights, so human rights only talked about rights of the accused, not the rights of the victim. Because rights of the victim were defended by the prosecutor, whereas the rights of the accused were defended by the most expensive lawyers. Crimes were underreported. So that's up to speed. So families received now educated girls, but they demanded submission. Families were getting educated, but still demanding submission. And they were wanting now double work. You may be working, you may be educated, but listen, you're a housewife back home, and we want sons from you. So educated yet, but if you're earning, fine, but that money also belongs to the mother-in-law or the husband. And of course, lack of care services. And of course, as you know, Indian men don't do work at home. So it's more a monopoly of the women, isn't it? In fact, the research says they work for a few minutes while the woman, even at work, works for hours together. The research is saying, not my bias. Women also became merchandise with television opening up. So when the merchandise was the woman's body. The item songs, see how it's evolved. The item songs and ran on the television across channels. Employment opportunities for women were very restricted still. Limited to certain areas of hospitality, nutrition, beauty care, designing, etc. Not into heavy engineering till things changed. I'm coming to that. And there were lack of angel funds. There's still lack of angel funds for women entrepreneurs. If you look at women entrepreneurial survey, India comes at bottom 5 of the 30 developed countries. At bottom 5, it's so tough for women entrepreneurs to have access to such funds. They may be there, but that's not a liberal policy. Let's look at women political power. There's still less than 10% in the parliament. There may be 1.3 million in the villages. So 10% less than at the parliament, and 1.3 with a million base of half of the women from the rural, but nothing in between. So you have a woman speaker, you have a woman president, you have a woman prime minister, you have a woman UPA, you have a woman MEA. What about in-betweens? From 1.3 million to the top. So that's a 10%. This is 1.3 million. In between, there's hardly anything. So we had missing women leaders. So that's the unfinished task. I go to the second part of my presentation. There are 3 things which are terribly unfinished in India. One is security. Terribly unfinished. Women's mobility is affected, and you know about the latest cases. The second is I feel, the financial independence. Still is not existing. She's unskilled. Now, I'm not talking of women present here. I'm talking of speaking of women who are not present here. And that's millions of Indians. So therefore, I'm speaking up for them. You and I are finished products already. I'm talking of the unfinished. So first is the security. The second is the financial independence. And the third thing which transforms a woman's life is when she's a migrant. And when she migrates to another's home. She loses her surname, and there is still a demand of dowry. So woman is the largest migrant population in India, isn't it? Because she migrates out. She either migrates from her home, she migrates from her surname, she migrates from her identity, she even migrates from another city, and maybe even to the United States after being married. It's only now that you're getting a visa that you might be allowed to work. Otherwise, the woman was not even allowed to work here because she was not considered on a visa. She's only coming with her husband. So my first unfinished agenda is get your basics right. The basics are wrong. There is insecurity, there's lack of financial independence, and there's a huge dowry demand still for a woman and her migration status. Third, government needs to partner with women. Now, recently you have government policies at the central level. There may be different policies at the state level, which started to give rural projects to women and make them as partners, saying, money to you, you look after, because we don't trust the men because of corruption. Third is the development of a woman manifesto. I think it's time we develop women manifestos. What are the womanistos? So womanifestos or woman infestos, which I think the Millennium Goals and the subsequent goals are looking at. Review of books. What kind of books our boys are trained through. There's a huge alteration needed in why can't the book says both work, both are very educated, both run the home, both look after the children, and both share the television, both read newspapers, both do shopping together, but both also have separate accounts and not a joint account where the woman again takes permission, how much money can she withdraw. Reclaiming public space. How do you reclaim public space if people are of a mindset to say, शाम को 9 बजे के बाद पूछते क्यों निकल सकते हो? How can you leave? How can women be out without due protection? Reclaiming public space. I would think some market should be declared one day, like Ragiri's, to say after 9 p.m. men at home, it's only space for women. Why not? I think we need to reclaim space. It's terribly a need for reclaiming public space. For them, a message saying men also trained to be at home, and women trained to get out of home and feel secure equally and look after each other. So reclaiming public space is the unfinished agenda. And then bridging the gap. How do you bridge the gap between an unmarried woman doing a great job? Oh, 5 minutes, plenty of time still. I'll be finishing even before that. The speed at which I'm going. How do you bridge the gap? Here's a brilliant woman who's done great software engineering, etc. She works with permission or on her own after marriage. But the moment she's become a mother, she has to drop out because my child now needs her. Her body also needs to recover. Until the child goes to the playway, who's looking after? She doesn't have a family support system, absence of home care services. And she drops out of seniority. She drops out of technology upgradation. Who bridges this gap? There is a natural fall for a qualified woman who could be Harvardian. Remember, once you become a mother, how do you fill the gap? So drive hard. Next is, how do you drive hard in narrowing diversity? That depends on the employer. How do you balance the number of men and women you have? Unless you continue to bridge the gap. If women, educated women, qualified, financially independent women want to be mothers as well, or both want to be parents. So bridging of the gap is not in the mindset of the mother, the woman, the parents, and the employer. So how do we keep the next challenges? How do you keep women on rolls, which means flexi hours, or creating corporate support systems, which say, well, bring your feeding child, we have feeding rooms, there will be a home office care or a home care. You go to work after 3 months of maternity or after paternity if the man has it. Bring the child at work. So how do you keep the woman on the rolls? And then, how do women stop feeling guilty about themselves? I've noticed this is a bigger gap we have. A woman starts feeling guilty if she's left a small child back home saying, oh, my child. But that's who said? Women can't have it all. Who said that? The best. Who said that? And Indian. Indira Nui. She said it, that women can't have it all. Yeah, you can't have it all, but why are you feeling guilty? Stop feeling guilty. You're making your choices, make your plans, but stop feeling guilty. Because then the guilt is hitting your work and your family at home. So you can't have it all. Yes, you can't be with your baby all the time. Just as you can't be in the office all the time. But why are you feeling guilty? Oh, I couldn't be in the office while the man is. And I can't be at home because my mother always was with me. I think women too will have to narrow this gap. And two more points finally, is we got to beat the drums together. Is women's rights only women's rights, or is it human rights? Is it community rights? Is it when women thrive, nation thrives. And when nation thrives, everyone thrives. I think we got to beat the drums together. How do we get to beat the drums together from all sections of society, which are so heavily divided between haves and have-nots, and between have-nots also, the little rich and the little less literate, and the little landed and the landless is so very heavily divided. And finally, women too need to lean in. They must lean in. I don't think we are a group pressure at all. Women are not a group pressure, whether it's professional or whether it's at men. We still are very divided. Friends, this is what I thought would be ideas to bridge the gap. It's a very, very long journey to take, but I guess each one of us will have to collectively, every day, move towards that. I do hope we narrow the gap, narrow the bridge. We narrow this gap and keep ourselves in role, as I said. Women thrive, country thrives. I hope, if not my lifetime, your lifetime. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks for staying back. Thanks for attending this. It's just wonderful to see all of you here. It's like performing at Prithvi Theatre. There's so many levels, and it's like performing in the thrust, almost in the round. Before I start, I'd like to first say that I heard Obama's speech today at the commemoration of the 50 years of the Selma March, and it was incredible. Log on to YouTube, have a look at it. He says the most important word in the American Constitution is the word we. And I just thought that encapsulated so much. And he talked about what it means to be American. And he talked about every different kind of American, gay, straight, Hispanic, Asian American, and he just went for it. It was an almost, in my opinion, as erudite as his speech at Cairo University when he spoke about race, but certainly more passionate than that. So just please do have a look at it. I just thought I'd mention that before I continue. So here I am in the middle of the story. I'm going to jump straight in the center of the story and say, I'm looking at 90 burqa-clad women. They're either in burqas or on salwar kameezes, and they're looking at me, and I've just thrown them a rugby ball. And I've said, you are going to play rugby. But they're standing in the middle of an indoor hall, and they have no clue what that means. So I said, okay, here we go. There are 90 of you. There's 13 teams of 7, barring one. One team will have 6, in case there's a maths wonk in the house. And 7 of you have to reach the other side of the room. The rules are you have to pass the ball backwards, but you can walk with the ball as far forwards as you want to. So each team tries to do this. And none of them reach the other side. So I stop them and I say, here's what you have to remember. If you pass the ball 2 steps back, which are the laws of a patriarchal world today? The laws for women is that you have to pass the ball back. How then can you move forward? If the ball is passed 2 steps behind, if the next woman does not walk 3 steps, she will not cross what is known as the gain line. So if I have studied till 2nd grade and I've passed the ball to the next woman in my family, there is no progress unless she crosses the gain line and studies till 3rd grade. So the idea of, I'm a genius. The idea of this whole sport as a kind of a metaphor, I extended. I said, play together to overcome a phalanx of men. there's not just one man who says, no, you can't do SSC, no, you can't study, no, you can't. There's an uncle, there's a chacha, there's a grandfather, there's a brother, there's a cousin. So get together. There are 7 of you because I put them across each other. I said 7 on 7. One person cannot beat 7, but 7 can beat 7. In fact, if you can get an 8th person, then that 8th person is free with the ball once you've committed each person in front of you. So collect a coalition of women in your family to counter the phalanx of men you will always face. Third, mark your man, mark your woman, but in this case, genuinely mark your man, which is, if you feel you have a great relationship with the grandfather, to get your way, you mark him. If you feel your sister is really good with your father, she marks him. Be strategic and mark your man. And go in there and do what you have to do to try and break the defenses of the opposition. And finally, and if I can only just get my speech back. Yeah. And finally, keep your eye on the ball, which means keep your eye on the issue. If the issue is, why can't Samina go out and work? Don't get emotional when you're arguing that point. Keep your eye on the ball. Do not drop that ball. Do not play the man. Play the ball. Keep your eye on the issue. Anyway, I'm going to segue into what Kiran alluded to about there can be no gender equality without men really understanding what it is. I'm going to qualify that by something I read really puts it really well in The Guardian. I read it today, but I think it's an article on March 4th, which I just saved a paragraph of to qualify before I speak about the role of men in the battle for gender justice. One of the great strengths, and I'm quoting, of India's diverse and flourishing women's rights movement is that many of its most powerful voices stress the systemic and universal nature of sexual violence, which, however, takes different forms depending on context. Rape can be a perfectly modern weapon that is intimately connected to other systems of privilege, exploitation, and inequality, including, in the Indian context, caste oppression, religious chauvinism, resource appropriation, including that of mineral-rich land from indigenous tribal communities by multinational corporations, and the vicious economic inequalities fostered by an unfettered capitalism prosperity that has yet to bring basic shelter and nourishment to millions. To talk about rape in terms of a savage cultural psyche locked to the past is to miss the dense wood for the most exotic trees. To not note the ways in which rape has been systematically used to keep Dalit women and communities in their place by upper castes threatened by change is to fail rape victims. To not think about how class rage can be lethally displaced onto the bodies of women in a context where economic disenfranchisement crackles like lightning through the body politic of India is to fail rape victims. To reduce rape to a matter of a generic Indian male mindset is to fail rape victims. It is at best embarrassingly facile. At worst, it is to collude in the silences about gender exploitation and sexual violence as very modern problems inseparable from every other form of global exploitation that blights out supposedly emancipated times. Having said that, I'm going to now address the issue of how men can actually, what men can do and should do in the fight. Right, so there's this advertisement. It's a very famous shaving blade company. I think all of us use those blades. I very rarely, because I hardly grow hair on my face. However, the ad is as follows. It was a huge campaign and a lot of breast beating, and they even asked me to endorse it, and I refused to. I think I just crushed the mic right now. And they say, I'm holding a sword to protect my woman. And it's such a deeply problematic and stupid way to look at the problem that, of course, I said no, but I thought I should just use that. I should preface what I'm going to say by saying that, by giving you that example. It is not enough to have men fight for gender justice. It is only enough when they fight for gender justice in the right ways. It's not about allowing women to do what they want to. It's understanding that she and only she decides what to do or not to do. It's not about taking decisions that are sensitive to women. It's about understanding that women will take their own decisions for better or for worse. It's about eliminating the idea, this is all my stuff, the Guardian stuff is over. Just in case, credit on Twitter. The whole thing is the Guardian thing. What did he say? Except for that burqa situation earlier on. That wasn't the Guardian. And crushing the mic. It's about eliminating the idea of control and power from our imagination. Power is the ability to make people do what you want them to do. Think about that. Real engagement is to create conditions that give people the choice to do what they desire. So how do we change social attitudes? We have to raise our boys better. And the time is gone. In this respect, Kiran, I disagree with you. The time is gone to give stuff in writing to them. Although I understand what you mean in terms of curricula in schools to be really gender sensitive and to be vibrant and real. But the time is gone to tell our boys what to do. We have to show them. So if the husband walks 3 steps in front of the wife when they go to catch the Rajdhani train onto the platform, you can be sure that when the boy grows up, he will walk 3 steps ahead of his wife. Who takes the decisions of what to wear at a family wedding? Who do we go to? Who does the boy go to ask, what should I wear at this wedding? And who does the boy go to when he has to ask, should he take science, arts, or commerce? When there is another man with the family, and the family goes out with this guest for a drive, does the husband drive and does the other man who's a guest sit in front? Or does the wife sit in front and the man sits at the back? What are deadlines given to boys and girls in the richest families? To the girl and to the boy. What I'm trying to say is this. If we, as parents, I'm not yet a parent, I'm not aware, but if we as parents do not do, it is impossible for our boys to learn. So let us look deep within ourselves and find how incredibly gender biased we are without even understanding that we are. In the long term, we have to eliminate the idea of machismo. But in the short term, I say subvert it. Bachche, it's manly to treat girls as equals. Suno, it's manly to learn cooking in school and not necessarily take craft and woodwork. Dekho, it is not manly to play with guns. Only bullies do that. Only people with weaknesses and a sense of false strength do that. And finally, it's absolutely fine to cry. Cristiano Ronaldo just keeps crying. But Nadal also cries, and he's fantastic. So that's second. Show, not tell, and look within. Second, redefine, subvert this whole idea of machismo. Third, institutions. It's just ridiculous how an institution, gargantuan institution in a government institution can, and I'm sure, sir, you will bear witness to this, and Kiran, you will too, they can change uniforms in 6 months. So why the hell can't they institute some gender-sensitive norms within that institution? At that point, you say, "Arey yaar, dekho, society is like this, so we also have to be like this." No, when you change uniforms, you didn't say, "Arey yaar, society." You didn't say that. You just changed it in 6 months flat. So we have to stop using that as an excuse or taking that as an excuse from people, from institutions, and say, "You're going to absolutely have to institute gender sensitivity within your organization." And finally, this is something I'm doing personally. I'll talk to you about it in the panel. Behind and around and in front of every woman who's been violated, there is a puzzled son. There is an angry father. There is an even ashamed grandfather. Biradri mein kaise, how will I show my face kind of thing. And these are all irrational responses and yet very natural, human responses. And if we believe that this fight cannot happen without 50.5% of the population, how are we reaching out to men? And who are the men who will be the first on the edges of that circle to be drawn by the magnet of gender justice? It will be these men. With deep and consistent counseling, these are the men who will then realize nobody else's wife, nobody else's mother, nobody else's daughter, for sure. But those feelings within me, where do they come from and where should they actually go? So that is something I'm developing with a wonderful NGO called Akshara. But I have other stuff which The Guardian doesn't have anything on me on this. But thank you, and we'll continue.
Like the other speakers before me, I'd like to thank the students for organizing this and all of you for being here to listen and participate, we hope, after the talk is over. My brief was to talk about economic empowerment, and I will really just focus on that. And the point is, how do you talk about economic empowerment until you see women as economic actors? And unfortunately, women are generally not seen as economic actors, as workers, as producers, as entrepreneurs. The public discourse on women and the government programs around women. If you look at government departments, it's women and child. So the woman is immediately linked with the child as a mother, which is fine, but that doesn't make her an economic actor. Reproductive health, violence, when you talk about women, violence, sex, that's what is generally there in the public discourse. Education is something that has entered in the last few decades, which is very welcome, but not her as an economic actor. Marty Chen read out the statistics. Only 30% of women are in the workforce. Is that true? I was recently part of a study in Bihar on women, generally working, what work women do. And the figures in Bihar, the government figures, the national statistical figures, are that only 11% of women in Bihar are actually working. Only 11%. You go, you walk the streets, you go into the villages, and women are active in every field. We did our own study, and we found that by their own definition, 60% of women are working. And why is it so low? Because those women who are farmers, who are looking after livestock, who are doing home-based work, like stitching, are not counted at all, and are not even seen. I'm going to actually focus on the 80% of women who are not in the middle class, because this situation has actually changed for women in the middle class. I think as Kiranji was telling about women many years ago who didn't think of themselves as economic actors, as careerists, or having a career, that has changed. I did a study many years ago, 35 years ago, talking to girls in colleges and asking, what is your future? And it was all about marriage. So the college was only between school and marriage. Today, I did the same study, and I talked to girls in colleges, and no one said to me that all I want to do is get married. Everyone said, this is what I want to do, I want to get a job, and I want to get married. So, but this is in the middle class. If you look at the 80% of women who are not in the middle class, they're back in that situation where they are not perceived as women who are part of the workforce. I told you about the statistics, where the statisticians or those who collect the data don't even see them. But their own men don't see them. I'll give you an example. I remember being in a village where a woman was sitting as part of SEVA. I'm from an organization called SEVA, Self-Employed Women's Association. I'll come to that later. So this woman is sitting there. She's got an order for doing some embroidery She's going to get paid well for it. She's sitting behind her husband doing this embroidery. And I asked, what work does your wife do? And he said, "Wo to kuch bhi nahi karti hai." And she's sitting right behind him. But that's the attitude that, a woman is not a worker in any way. The one reason also for that, and that is generally in society, is that most of these women, and of course most men also, are not in the corporate sector or the public sector, not in the private corporate sector or in the public job sector. They're in what we call the people's economy, the people's sector. And actually, in India, 90% of all enterprises consist of people who are very small micro entrepreneurs and who are in what I'm calling the people's economy, not the corporate and not the public economy. They're small manufacturers, they're home-based workers, they're in trade, they're out in the streets, you see them, but you don't see them. Often you don't even, they're there, but you don't see them. They're the street vendors. Another area where women are completely left out of is the most important area in the economy, which is the financial sector. Why are they left out? They don't have accounts. If they have an account, they don't use it, they don't save. In fact, this new program that has been done by this government, the Jan Dhan Yojana, it's really great because each person opens an account. Now, it's not a new program because that program was also being run earlier, but it has picked up momentum. But entering the financial sector, I think that's a very, very key thing for women to begin to become economic actors or begin to be visible as economic actors. I'd like to give a few examples of something that I have been involved with in Seva on how do you make women visible first as economic actors and then using that for women to become empowered. I talked about home-based workers. What are home-based workers? They're women who work in their homes, who stitch or make bidis or make incense sticks, and there are thousands of things, food processing, thousands of things they do, and it's perhaps the largest group of working women in our country. But again, because they're working in their homes, they're not recognized. And basically, they work for small contractors or they sell in very poor markets. And so they're extremely exploited. An agarbatti worker, for example, working the whole day can earn 30 to 40 rupees if she works for 8 hours. Similarly, almost every type of home-based workers. And what we discovered was that many of these women are actually, especially those who are doing embellishment or embroidery, they're doing it for very large corporations, Gap, Monsoon, Walmart, I don't want to name them all. All the outsourcing goes to these women through a whole chain of contractors, which means they end up with a very small amount. What can you do about it? Well, basically bring them into the market. Help them form their own, in Seva we have helped them to form their own producer cooperatives, their own producer companies, and their own trade facilitation centers so that they become managers, they become owners, and they get their orders. And another thing is that their home is their workplace. So until the home is improved with water and sanitation and better lighting and modern energy techniques, their productivity will always remain low. Financial inclusion. I said the Jan Dhan Yojana, the previous government's DBT campaign to open accounts and give benefits. However, in Seva, we started this financial inclusion many years ago. And financial inclusion is not just opening an account. It is having savings. It is getting access to loans. Loans are something that women, I think Kiranji referred to it, that it's very difficult for women to get loans because they don't own anything, they don't have securities. So getting loans, and then you go one step further. We have big insurance companies in the country. How many of the women actually have insurance? And then going even one step further, if you look at most families, and I'm talking about most poor families that lower 80%, when the women get old, what Marty Jen referred to, old and widowed, they have no pensions. They have all their savings is gone, or they never had any savings. So what do you do for pensions and old age? And so that's what we have tried to do. We formed Seva Bank, where women's own savings, it's a women's bank, own savings. And from that, they take loans, and they have their own insurance, and now savings for pension. So you deepen the financial inclusion, you deepen the women as a financial actor. And finally, unless you change policies, it becomes very difficult. I told you this is the people sector. The people sector really has policies very much against it. It's not recognized and supported. For example, I mentioned street vendors, women who sell vegetables on the street. They are actually criminalized because they are not given spaces. And since they are not given spaces, they are illegal. And if they're illegal, then they're criminals. And they're lifted and taken away. So, and how do you change policies? You can only do it through your voice. So coming together and bringing out your issues. Of course, I'm putting it in a very short way, because in Seva, we've had satyagrahas, we've gone to the court, we've had dialogues with the police and the cities. And finally, last year, there was a law passed which is there to protect the street vendors. It's a law on street vendors. So the thing is that you can't be passive. These things are there, but until one gathers together, and coming together, I think, is perhaps one of the most important things that's required in order to move to the next step. Because one person alone, I think Rahul mentioned it, one person alone, her voice is very dim and quiet. But when they come together, when women come together, and especially when poor women come together, they realize a strength that they didn't have before. And the strength is not only speaking to others, but it's also the complete lack of confidence, the fear that exists within her. The support from other women really strengthens her voice. And in Seva, we have now, I think, 2 million members. So it's quite a strong voice. What next? I mean, where do we go from here? 2 minutes. One, I would like to say a little more about the people sector, and I will at some point. But we really need to recognize that our economy is a people's economy. There is a very good and very strong private sector, a private corporate sector. There's the government. But the real strength and the entrepreneurship is coming from the people sector. They should be supported with policies, like I told you about the street vendors. Recently, I think the new budget has a bank for micro entrepreneurs, and it's a good step. But the corporates can support just as well, and the corporates should support more and integrate them within their own production systems, at the same time strengthening them in their skills and their managerial capacity. And finally, I think the future is with that 80% of young girls. What has happened, the positive things that have happened with the girls in the middle class, that needs to happen with the girls among the poor and among both the complete poor as well as the not so poor, but the lower 80%. Education, girls are going for education. They do study up to 9th class, 10th class, 12th class, then what? Today, a 9th class girl or a 10th class pass girl cannot really enter a job. So there's that whole gap between what she learns and what the job market requires. But there's more of a gap. There's the security concerns, there's the parents. I think you told the grandfather and the uncle and the log kahenge, those people who are not, who don't allow her to go out. So I think that's the future. It's those 80% of girls. And I think in the next 20 and 30 years, when we talk about emerging women, those are the women which will emerge. But I think they need a helping hand from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran and Rahul and Raynana. And as we've heard, the sources or dimensions of women's disadvantage and empowerment are many, and those who can help come from every sector. And we now open the floor to the audience. Are there mics? Okay. There's a mic on either side. What you do in the traditions of the Harvard Kennedy School is you line up behind the mic if you want to speak. And as the dean of the Harvard Kennedy School always says, please ask a question, and a question ends with a question mark. So it's not a platform for everyone's philosophy. It's a chance to engage with the panelists. Thank you. So we'll start on this side. And please introduce yourself. And if you are targeting your question at one panelist in particular, let us know that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the panelists. I'm Pushpi, was a reconciliation coordinator for the Sri Lankan president before I came to Kennedy as a Mason Fellow. My question is to Kiran Bedi. With rape being a hot issue in India, I'm wondering what the government was trying to gain by banning India's daughter. Thank you.
Nothing. Simply nothing. I have a personal view, and that view comes from crime prevention. Government has the power to ban anything, and this has been by a resolution of the parliament, as you've seen. So that apart, my view of looking at the movie is strictly from an ex-police officer, from crime prevention. Why? You cannot prevent crime till you know the cause of crime, till the whole mindset of crime. And that's what I was used to practice personally. So I think what they've lost out on, to my mind, is to put it up front, a very stark reality of this man's, the rapist's, cause of crime. Because he thinks women are not supposed to be out in public spaces, not for them. Secondly, women are supposed to surrender, exactly the pattern which I told you, that what persisted and still persists in a very large section of community. I wanted to know by this research, and here is the government who could know by research, what is the percentage of men still in this category? And then how do you target them to change their mindset? So I would think they have their own reasons and perfect wisdom of the parliament. After all, parliament is a collective wisdom of the country. So collective wisdom on what part, and they may have their own very correct reasons, but I would think if we had presented this film in a manner where we need to identify how many Mukeshas are around in the country who are lurking around, who still think women should just surrender. Women have no they're more of a domestic, harmless domestic animals. I think we've lost out an opportunity. I would believe that.
Thank you. Yes?
My name is Manasa. I'm a member of a political party in India called Lok Satta Political Party, founded by Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. My question is that, well, when a woman is expected to get married, she's not only supposed to bring dowry, but she's also expected to be pure, as in virgin. We don't have rights on our own bodies, and there are double standards. Men can do anything, but a woman is supposed to be a virgin. I know it's a provocative question. How do we change this mindset that a woman is the same as man and can choose what she can with her body? How do we change this mindset? My question is for any of the panelists who's ready to answer it. Thank you.
You must.
And which panelist? Rahul? Rahul? Yeah?
I'm too impure to answer this.
It's not, I don't know. How do you change that mindset? Actually, I think the way that women are regarded as having the honor of the family in her, as carrying, that she's the property of this family, and then she's taken to that family, and she's carrying the honor, and then she's carrying the purity. I think that until it's not as isolated, it's not an isolated belief. It's wrapped up with this whole thing of women should be in the home. They should be the sitas of the family. They should be pure. As women come more into social life, into public spaces, into the workforce, all those beliefs begin to crumble.
Yeah.
And I have not had the experience of actually telling people that you should see women sexually different from men or similar to men, that they should have the same kind of sex life. I don't think we need to absolutely say it. I think as society changes, that happens, or that should happen. And women should assert themselves, and they do. I think what the middle class women are doing is quite different from what the large number of women are doing. Sorry, I can't keep going on and on.
Okay. Karen, anyone else?
Well, I just feel that if you look at 25 years ago and today, there's a tiny percentage, but a growing percentage of men who don't care whether they marry a virgin or not. So I fully agree with you, Rana. There are many, many social movements that when they start taking place, sweep with them all the allied issues. I'm not saying this is not an issue to think about, but to actually focus on it would be emasculating the issue. I think it'll just be blown away by a larger purpose behind it, which is a true emancipation of women. So I mean, one doesn't have to specifically focus on it. It might be counterproductive.
No?
My short contribution would be nurturance. Nature versus nurturance. And I think the mindset is you grow with it. Unless the parents play a role in grooming their boys and girls as persons. You happen to be a boy, you happen to be a girl, but you're persons, you're individuals. You have a gender, that's excellent, and this gender has both of you have their own qualities. That's how nature balances. So if this kind of education and nurturance comes in all early on in life, they'll be able to resist the experience which tries to overturn it. So I think that's the key. So key is in parenting, the key is in schooling. Schooling, and 80% of the schooling is in the hands of women today in India. Teachers are women. So it's back to women. It's 80% women and 100% mothers. 50% fathers. But they're 20% headmasters. So I think the real nurturance happens, and the foundation of your mindset is laid from home and schooling. After that, it's a little too late.
Yes.
My name is Renu. I'm a mid-career student here at the Kennedy School. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. My question is for Rahul. Rahul, you very nicely said that we have to change the way we bring up our boys. I have a 15-year-old son, and I have started talking to him about these issues, I think maybe 2-3 years back when he was about 12. But the single most thing which has really made a lot of impact on him is when you told him that leave the women to their own agenda. They'll find the answers, when you visited him at Woodstock recently. So I am wondering how, I realize the kind of influence when men and people who are not directly related to these children can impact these 15-year-old minds. How can we make this a national conversation?
By giving us large gifts.
You have an amazing sense of humor.
Very expensive gifts. And we'll do it all the time. No, look, I think I think for a boy to hear it from a man, and closer home the better, but a boy to hear it from a man is infinitely more powerful for him because he's been raised in patriarchy. So it's kind of subverting the whole thing because like, oh, okay, I'm hearing it from this person, whatever, must be sensible, etc. And also the same gender. To get more men to talk about this in the way that I do, I'm sure there are plenty. They just don't seem to be in public life. They don't have the kind of heft or stature that somebody else would have in public life, stature. So I think that now you're making me rack my brains and think of all the men who can actually speak in public life about these issues. And I can't imagine I've ever actually had a chat with any famous man saying, well, tell me about your views on women. I really haven't done that, but it's an idea worth exploring because I know a couple of celebrities have begun to talk like this in India, but not enough and not in enough depth. But it's an idea.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Neil Desai, teaching Gandhian philosophy at the University of Virginia. First of all, thanks to all the speakers for a great presentation. I think hashtag amazing sense of humor will be very popular on Twitter tonight. But yeah, I think Kiranji raised a very important point. I'm glad she raised this point that equality will not be achieved until patriarchy is wiped out of all the areas of popular culture and education and media into which it permeates. And one very specific aspect of that, which has always concerned me, is Fair and Lovely and related items. For anyone that doesn't know, Fair and Lovely is a cream marketed mostly towards women, although recently also towards men, which supposedly makes your skin lighter, whiter, fairer. And my question is this concept reconcilable with the idea of women's equality at all? If it's not, why do so many women choose to purchase these creams anyway? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And just generally, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Who is going to take that?
It's for you.
Blame the Bollywood. It's Bollywood perpetuates it.
Yeah.
So you see, and that has a very
Kiran, come on. Come on, this is racism. This is not patriarchy. This is the whole thing is about race here.
You
It's
do.
about,
Bollywood does. You may not be a part of it.
no. I'm
You may not
actually
be playing that role, Rahul.
Look, I'm saying that Bollywood does it in the same ratio that it would be happen anywhere else. It doesn't propagate it, and certainly hasn't started it. I mean, Sujata with Nutan was made when?
You didn't let me complete
Sorry,
the sentence.
finish.
You're right. But Bollywood plus. But Bollywood is very impacting. More than
Zarur.
mommy, daddy telling you. Bollywood is impacting.
But the fundamental thing is, Marty, this is not about a patriarchy. I mean, there are so many men who today want to make themselves fairer. And there are so many women who want to make themselves fairer in parts of the body you can't even see when they're dressed up. It's astonishing. So it's all to do with there's a socialization and sexualization of women, and you have celebrities here who have become 4 shades fairer over the years, pop singers and actors here too. And so they practice it here, and the patriarchy here is not half as much as you would see in a village in India. So this is actually a matter of color, and I think it's race, color, colonialism, all of that conflated into one. Let me just tell you this. When I was in advertising, I was doing an advertisement for a winter lotion, and I asked for the entire market of lotions and a pie chart of market share. And I saw the market shares, and I said, hang on one second, where's Fair and Lovely in this? And there was a long embarrassed silence amongst the research guys. I said, where is Fair and Lovely in this? And they said, sir, Fair and Lovely outsells this entire market. Fair and Lovely is a pie unto itself. If we put it here, you wouldn't see the market shares of the other people. It's that bad.
Thank you.
But I agree, it's a question of color.
Yeah.
I mean, our concept of what is beautiful is completely tied up with color. So.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Rao. I'm a South Indian. I have a comment and a question. My comment is, when the human race began, we started as a matriarchy. At some point, we took over and became a patriarchy. And you see that matriarchy in India and some northeastern tribes, and also Native Americans here, Iroquois people, they still have matriarchy. I worked with them. But as I look at the history of this country, women's movement, the only time women were liberated was Second World War, when all the men went to war.
We need the question.
The question is, I'm coming to the question.
Okay.
They were liberated at that time. However, women's liberation went on, they couldn't liberate themselves fully. So my question is, given this experience from other countries like America, and also maybe some Scandinavian countries, how would we really liberate women who are the 50% of the population? Do we need a Second World War like that, or short of war, and also the impact of Hindu religion and all those things? How we really liberate, I mean, this is something I was seriously thinking about. If you have any ideas, not just the polemics and washing out of the few reforms, but real liberation.
Thank you.
So I thought we were trying to do that here in a nuanced way.
That's
what
But
we
we
did.
clearly have fallen short.
Well, sorry.
No?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's
You
it.
did that.
That was what you were going to
Try,
say?
yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I do have a point there, which is that how do we learn from other countries? I think the women's movement particularly has women coming together from different countries. And I think that has given a lot of strength to women in India also. So starting from 1975, where suddenly all these women came together, and further on where we have international conferences and we read about women in other countries, it does make a big difference.
Thank you.
South
Please.
America.
Yeah, my name is Sanket. Thanks for the wonderful speech. I must confess that I always walk 2 steps ahead of my wife, never realizing that I do this injustice to
Good for you.
her. But I was thinking about this thought, and I felt that maybe partly she must be blamed too, because she feels herself comfortable walking 2 steps behind me. So,
Where did she learn that from?
She comes from Jaipur.
Where did she learn that from?
Where did she learn from? Maybe her parent. Yeah, but that's a good thought. So my question basically is that, these wonderful speeches and exchange of thoughts happens at Harvard days or maybe MIT days or, different civil society, But how can we take these thoughts to villages, to Dalits, to poor people where this inequality exists more than, people among here? How can we take these thoughts and messages there?
These 2 ladies are doing exactly that.
Yep.
I mean, she spent 40 years, 45 years?
Not quite yet.
Okay. 11 years.
I think
Yeah, they've been on the ground.
As a government.
They've been on the ground, yeah. They're not just here just to impress you.
Yeah, they are social activists, I would say. But as a government, what actions government can take to send this message across to villages and poor people who do not have access to YouTube videos or your impressive speeches and all?
I think keep the dialogue going. I work with one of my foundation works with villages in Haryana. Keep the dialogue going. And unless you keep the dialogue going, like the Nukkar Natak, the workshops, the seminars, the dialogue going, there is no dialogue going. We've got government machinery here. You've got the panchayat officers, you've got the SDOs, you've got the Zilla Parishads, you've got the SDMs, you've got the deputy commissioners. They should be doing what the NGOs do, but they don't. In fact, one of the functions we invited the deputy commissioner of our Gurgaon district, and I told him, thank you very much for coming. And he was candid enough to say, ma'am, why do you thank me? You're doing exactly what you should be doing. For the first time, I found an officer, that officer, I bet he did a course here, I don't know. I bet he was different. He said, but ma'am, what you're doing is our duty to do. It's from that thought I'm coming. The NGOs are exactly doing what the government should have been doing, but the government's falling short of its resources. But the point is, even what they have could deliver much more. So we've got to keep the dialogue going with panchayats, with cup. You've got a lot of cups. The cups, do you know yesterday's news was Haryana is making pregnancy, any pregnancy within the first 3 months, mandatory to be registered. Because Haryana is falling short of percentage per thousand, falling even below 850. So they have come to a stage where pregnancy must be registered. I believe it's in overseas countries too. But this is the stage in which India is. Keep the dialogue going. If you don't, I don't see panchayat officers training, doing workshops, engaging panchayats, engaging people. That is what a public civil servant must be doing as a regular field work. But he or she becomes more office oriented. Unless you do that, you will not reach and break through. That's what NGOs do. But after all, how many NGOs do you have?
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. So one here, quickly.
Good evening. First, the passion on this topic conveyed by each of you has been palpable, so thank you. My name is Lippy Roy. I'm a doctor at Mass General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and at Boston's, I care for Boston's homeless men and women, many of whom have experienced trauma, chronic, repeated. Here's my question. Could anyone on the panel, ideally all of you, identify the 3 most either urgent or impactful measures or interventions that would advance the respect and opportunities for girls and young women at any sector, government, law enforcement, police? I know many of you mentioned things, but anything specifically most urgently now? Thank you.
Do you want to do 1 each or 3 each?
Yeah, let's do 1 each. That'll be 3.
Okay.
I mean, I could say a number, but since I was talking about the economic, I think the most important thing right now is to recognize the work of women and to build their skills and bring them into the very recognizable workforce. I think that's, in fact, right now the most important thing.
Marty, I would say the sensitization of the police and the judiciary system in terms of what happens to women when they actually have to, confront the system, that should change completely, and it'll just unlock a lot more, an amazing amount of fearlessness and energy from them for addressal of their.
And we have the pioneer here, right?
I would say predictable security. Public space must belong to them. And once you have the public space, you get the mobility, you get the skills development, you get the financial independence. A lot comes with that. Predictable security, where a woman in India, once she walks the streets, she mustn't feel afraid that she would be harassed. But if harassed, she would know, she would have the courage to report. And report, she should know that it would be acted upon, and if found guilty, the man would be quickly punished. So exemplary punishment. So predictable criminal justice system.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to end on. I'm sorry for the long queue of people to ask questions. And I just want to thank our panelists again, so please. Thank you. And I also want to thank Sanjay Bhai and Rohit Bhai and Sagar Bhai, all the Bhais who organized the Women's Empowerment Panel. Thank you.